6 o'clock, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Agenda review and disposition, is there anything to add?
I do not have anything to add.
All right. Minutes of September 8th.
Move to approve the minutes as written.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain, I wasn't here.
All right. Brian abstain. Get that, Jen? Okay. So before we open privilege of the floor, I'm just going to lay out some ground rules so that everyone has opportunity to speak. If you could please state your name and residence. Keep your things as briefly as possible so everyone can get a chance. The board will not respond to public comment during privilege of the floor. The board may take comments under advisement and consider during their deliberation under discussion. The board may or may not take action on public comment. And if you have a question on Zoom, please raise your hand. We are not having a chat feature tonight. So we're going to open it up to privilege of the floor. Okay.
Hello, my name is Martha Burroughs. I am here as a parent of an 8th grader at Plymouth Elementary, and I also have an 11th grader over at the high school. And I want to start by thanking again the SAU and the board for all of the hard work that you've done throughout the pandemic to take care of our school and our larger community. And I especially want to recognize that I know that across the state, school boards have been put in a really difficult position to make public health decisions. And I know that you don't take that responsibility lightly, and so I appreciate your commitment to taking the time to think through these issues and to listen to those of us who have some things to say. I'm asking you here once again to put a mask requirement in place at Plymouth Elementary to help our community fight the spread of COVID-19. The medical expertise is pretty clear that masking in school is an important public health measure to stopping this virus. First, since early August, the CDC has recommended universal indoor masking for all students, staff, teachers, and visitors to K-12 schools, regardless of vaccination status. The American Academy of Pediatrics states students older than 2 years old and all school staff should wear face masks at school unless medical or developmental conditions prohibit use. Last week, Spear Memorial Hospital issued its own statement aligning with the CDC's recommendation for universal masking. And 3 new studies released just last week highlight the importance of using layered prevention strategies, including universal masking, to stop the spread of COVID and minimize disruption to school operations. Of particular note, quote, one report from Arizona revealed that schools in 2 of the state's most populous counties were 3.5 times more likely to have COVID-19 outbreaks if they did not have a mask requirement at the start of school compared with schools that required universal masking on day 1. But I also understand that the board wants to base our measures upon the local situation here in Plymouth. So I ask you to consider this data, that first, the vaccination rate for the town of Plymouth remains low, with only 46% of residents fully vaccinated. This is 10% below the national average, and it actually puts us on par with the 11 least vaccinated states in this country. Within our SAU, we've already seen one significant cluster of COVID-19 at Wentworth Elementary, resulting in approximately 25% of the student body becoming infected. Since the last board meeting on September 8th, the 7-day average for COVID in New Hampshire at that time was 319 cases. As of Friday, this past Friday, it was 473 cases, a 49% increase in our state. And during the same time period, the daily average cases in Grafton has jumped 133%. It is true that overall numbers of COVID in the US are coming down, but that trend is not happening everywhere, and it is not happening here in New Hampshire, where our vaccination numbers are stagnant, and where cold weather is going to drive more people indoors, where they will be unmasked and closer together. Generally, experts agree that in states like Florida, which had raging cases over the summer, numbers are finally trending downward because of increased immunity. In other words, COVID has burnt through the unvaccinated tinder and is moving on. And here in Plymouth, there is still a lot of unvaccinated tinder available. My request that we require masks is based on 2 things. First, I believe we should enact policies that protect all our children, particularly our most vulnerable. And while I recognize that overall most children seem to recover from COVID-19 without suffering some of the more terrible symptoms, the jury is still out on long-term effects from the virus that may not become apparent for months or years after infection. There is no way to predict which child in our community could become sick with multi-inflammatory syndrome, a serious condition that seems to be most dangerous and common in young children. And finally, our children under 12 still have no access to vaccines, and those with underlying medical conditions like asthma or diabetes may be at greater risk of developing complications. Second, I believe we should enact policies that protect the larger community of Plymouth. All of our children, and many if not most of our staff, live in households that include people of different age groups, vaccination statuses, and medical backgrounds. Taking the virus home to a more vulnerable family member is a real risk. All of our children and staff live in the greater Plymouth community where they interact every day with neighbors, friends, retail workers, doctors, nurses. Exposing a vulnerable member of these groups is a real risk. And finally, we are lucky to have an excellent hospital here in Plymouth. And during normal times, it is able to meet our community's medical needs, but it is a small hospital with 25 beds. It would not take much to overwhelm the staff and resources available. I want to end with an anecdote. Since the last board meeting, one of my children required emergency care at Spear Hospital for a condition that, while treatable, was very time sensitive and demanded immediate access to a healthcare professional. We were so lucky that on that Sunday morning, a very capable ER physician at Spear was available to help my child and quickly get us set up for surgery to prevent much more serious complications. I cannot imagine what would have happened if we were living in one of the towns or states in this country where medical care has been overwhelmed. The outcomes could have been frightening and absolutely life-altering for my child. Requiring masks in our schools is about so many things. It is about protecting individual children. It is about protecting vulnerable community members, and it is about protecting our critical health care staff and resources. Community health is not an individual choice. It is something we do together to protect each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Chris?
So I want to be mindful of time. So I wrote my remarks, although of course I want you to know that they come from my heart. I wanted to just speak wholeheartedly what I wrote them. So my name is Jess Tebow. I'm a resident of Plymouth, a parent of an 8th grader and a 5th grader here at Plymouth Elementary School, and my oldest goes to the high school. I want to first extend my deep gratitude to our school board members and to our school leaders and all the educators. I was incredibly impressed by how effectively and courageously you all protected our children throughout the entire past academic year. The COVID protocols we had in place mattered. The physical distancing and the mask wearing worked. And we know that based on research, but we also know that anecdotally here in our own community. Like you all, I pored over the data. I texted my aunt, who is a nurse practitioner at Boston Medical Center, probably way more times than I should have, considering she was trying to save lives. And I spent plenty of sleepless nights thinking about how to best protect my children, our family, our friends, and the entire community. Also, like you, I care deeply about the health and well-being of our children. I want to make sure they are safe and healthy, holistically speaking. I don't want them to get COVID, and I also want them to feel connected and loved with a sense of belonging to their school, to our community, because we know how important that is for their mental health and their overall development. I've thought a great deal about what it would mean psychologically for my children if they were a part of making someone else sick. This is why we protected their grandparents by not having any physical contact with them for over a year until they had access to the vaccine. It was hard, incredibly painful, but it would have been harder if we lost someone. The sad truth is that the pandemic is not over. In fact, we've had more COVID cases in this state this fall in comparison to last fall. The good news is, though, we know what to do. We know how to physical distance, and we know how to put on a mask. Wearing a mask is such a small sacrifice for those able to wear them, but truly is an act of love. It's a practice that honors our interconnection throughout the community. My 10-year-old daughter came home from school recently and said, "Mom, my friend told me that I'm going to die from carbon dioxide because I always wear my mask." That's not true, is it? My heart sank because being a young person in school is hard enough without the mask debate that only perpetuates otherness. I, of course, assured her that that wasn't true and it is safe wearing a mask. I explained to her how her aunt wears a mask for 12 to 14 hours a day, upwards of 24 hours, while caring for patients in the hospital. Satisfied with that explanation, she looked at me and affirmed, "Fake heroes wear capes, but real heroes wear masks." Our children are wise. and they deserve the adults in their lives who are supposed to protect them to courageously make decisions that prioritize the health and well-being of them. Our children need us to be brave in this moment. It's not easy to make a decision that could be unpopular, and in this situation, a decision that unfortunately became politicized, despite it being a public health crisis. But in this case, lives do depend on our ability to make these important decisions, and our children's well-being is at stake. So I want to thank you for taking the time to listen and considering voting on making a mask requirement for Plymouth Elementary School.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jenny Tebow, and I am a Plymouth resident and parent to a 3rd grader and 1st grader. I have handouts. It's 2 pages of listings of people, plus a piece of paper that lists some comments if you want to take and pass around. All right. Chairperson, members of the board, thank you for your time tonight. I'm going to be a little bit more precise and specific in my speech because they spoke everything that everyone is thinking. I am here tonight to speak in favor for a mask requirement for all people inside of buildings at Plymouth Elementary School. I know that this is an emotional issue, and I feel that the science backs up the emotions. Masking works, and our students excel at it. I hate getting the emails from Superintendent Walsh, probably as much as she hates sending them. I want my kids to stay in school. I put together a petition online, which is what's being passed around, signed by over 50 people, 41 of which are Plymouth residents, which is obviously what you would take into consideration. But many of the non-residents, some of which I knew, so I wrote little comments on there, are either former townspeople or their family members to current students. I am here to ask you, with others of my mind that are here today, plus those who signed this petition who could not make it, for a member of the school board who specifically put forward a motion to make masks mandatory inside our buildings to be reviewed at each monthly school board meeting going forward. Thank you for all of the work that you do as our school board.
Please speak. Hi folks, my name is Stephanie Halter. I am the proud parent of a 5th grader at Plymouth Elementary School, and I too reside in Plymouth. And I agree with the 3 ladies that spoke before me, and I won't reiterate all of the science, but I think that they did such a great job specifying and laying it out for you. I too am going to call on the school board tonight to make a motion for a mandatory masking policy inside Plymouth Elementary School to be reviewed each month would be fair moving forward so that our children are protected. And one of the things that I wanted to speak to tonight was not necessarily the science behind the masking, but how our children are being treated in the school building who are wearing masks and those who aren't. Right, so there's this concept, I'm a sociologist, I have my PhD in sociology and I love it so much, but one of the concepts that we use a lot to explain criminal behavior is this idea of peer influence. And I'm sure you're very aware of peer influence and the influence that peers can have on good and bad behavior, right? I mean, it's very well established in the research literature. So this concept, I think, is playing out in our day-to-day relationship between our kids. And I have talked with several people in the school, other teachers who are working with our kids, and they're always so proud that nobody's being bullied. And that's true. I think our kids are doing a really good job. I don't think they're bullying others to take off their masks. But they who are not wearing masks are putting forth considerable pressure on our children in this environment that they have a lot already on their plate to deal with. So they're being pressured to take off their masks in many different situations. Right? Maybe it's just because they want to be cool and they want to be like that kid whose parents aren't making them wear a mask for political reasons. Or maybe that they don't believe in the science. Right? I get that. There are some people that don't follow that level of the scientific rigor, and they're not taking that into account when they make their decisions. We all get knowledge from different places. Right? I, as a scientist, believe that we should follow the science as a way of knowing, and we should allow that to influence our decisions that we make. And I know that's not a decision that everybody else believes in, and that they get information from other sources. We can't control that. I do wish that as a community we did a better job educating parents on getting vaccinated. And I feel like if we had done that work over the summer between SPEAR and our school administration, maybe we'd be in a better place right now, that we wouldn't have to wear masks. But I feel like we aren't in a better place. Right? We're not. We have a very low vaccination rate in our town, and our children are at considerable risk. I think what we saw at Wentworth Elementary School just a few weeks ago is prime for that. Right? That's great evidence of what could really happen in our school. And I really don't want my kid to have to get COVID. I really don't. And I don't want her friends to get it and get sick and have to take heart medication possibly for the rest of their lives. And that piece about the peer influence, I think that is happening more at the older grades, right? At the younger grades, I've talked with some parents with kids in first grade. It just seems like a lot of those kids are wearing masks. But as the kids get older, when they're subjected to more pressure and influenced by their peers, that's when they're not. They're taking them off, even if their parents want them to have them on, because they are being influenced by their peers. And we should take that pressure off of them and protect them in that way. Not just have masks for the health benefit, but also to take pressure off them in their peers. Right? It's really unfair, the situation we're allowing to continue to go on at the school in that way. And I've seen it, and I've talked to my daughter about it and her friends. And there is some significant pressure on our children to take their masks off. So thank you so much for being on the board, for hearing all of our comments tonight. I do hope that one of you will bravely make a motion and call for a vote for our mask policy tonight, so that our kids can be fully protected in school. And I know that this is an elected position. I just encourage somebody to bravely call for a vote so that we can see where our elected officials stand. So thank you so much for your time.
Is there anyone else? Yeah,
Sure, I'd like to speak.
please do.
My name is Madeline McLemore. I'm a Plymouth resident, and my son is in 3rd grade at Plymouth Elementary. I will be brief because I feel that the statements that were made prior to mine pretty much covered everything that I would have said. But I am in support of requiring masks, a mandatory masking policy in Plymouth Elementary. I ask for you to vote on that tonight and to vote in favor of it. And I agree that it's fair to revisit it on a monthly basis, because one thing we know is you never know what's going to happen next month. But what we don't want to do is wait and continue as we are, and then somebody dies or somebody brings COVID back to a family member who becomes gravely ill, and then we come back together as a community and say, gosh, if we had only put those masks on, or if we had only done this, or we should have done this. I believe that masking is a simple, effective measure that we can take as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone in Zoom land? Any hands raised?
I don't see any.
No, I don't see any. All right, thank you.
Hand feature there, John. Yes?
They would have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's available.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Oh, yes, please.
Hi, my name is Morgan, and I'm a resident. I wasn't actually going to speak this evening. So I am for a mask mandate. I can't think of kids and peer pressure. I think of one kid, my 4th grader, whose grandmother passed away. I think of the 4th grader that's getting pressured to take her mask off to the point where I can't tell her a family friend's child passed away from COVID. So I can't speak on this large scale, but I can speak for us as having COVID ourselves and a family member between me and my kids have lifelong issues from COVID that I really don't think anybody else needs to go through that at all. And I really hope you consider voting on a mask mandate.
Is there anyone else? I don't miss anyone. Make sure everyone gets opportunity to speak. Okay, thank you. All right. We're gonna move on to our principal's report. Please.
That's me. So our total enrollment is exactly where it was a month ago. I thought I'd give a range of class size just to give people a picture of that. We have, our smallest class is 12 and our largest is 17. So we're right in that similar window to where we've been in past years. Our theme this month is compassion. We are pulling forward the presentation from Rachel's Challenge that occurred last week and working within the building to recognize compassionate acts. And I had the middle school students, I wanted to let you know that I had the middle school students do some self-reflection on the presentation from Rachel's Challenge. And we actually gave them longer time to reflect than they were comfortable with. And I was very impressed with the personal writing narrative that I got back from many of the middle schoolers about that. The banner is in the front lobby, the Rachel's Challenge banner, and I would love everyone, any parent or board member who's here to sign that, just committing to being compassionate. And I wanted to let you know, under the area of curriculum instruction and assessment, we're mostly done with our NEWA assessments. Thank you to all the teachers for proctoring that and committing to that work. And all of our curriculum is underway. Under social, emotional, and behavioral health, Mr. Sheehan, we wanted to let the community know and the board know that Mr. Sheehan has a different schedule this year, so he is not going in and teaching guidance classes. He has a schedule now where he can support kids either at recess when they are having social, emotional, behavioral needs right in the moment with other kids, or have the time in his schedule to pull kids, to talk with them about things that are going on in their lives, or to talk about some maybe new skills that they need to work on. And wanted to shout out a new kindergartner to Plymouth Elementary School under student shout-outs. There's a kindergartner named Bailey Gabenko, and if you meet him, he is one of the nicest young men that I have met in a long time. He greets every student positively and says, "Good morning, how are you?" And we're so glad that his family has come and joined our community, and him in particular. Under teachers and staff, I wanted to thank Beth Wilkie, who hosted the Chris Van Dusen author visit and worked with me on the rainy day to figure out what we were going to do at the last minute to make sure that our kids still had access to the author visit. And I wanted to thank Andy McDonald for his work to bring Rachel's Challenge again to Plymouth Elementary School, and all of the arrangements that went into that. Both events were fantastic, so thank you to both of them. Want to let the community know that there is a PTA meeting on Wednesday night virtually, and the link for that is available through the front office. So if people want to join that, we encourage all parents to join the PTA. Last month I let you know that Tracy Sawyer was leaving Cafe Services. That was a big joke. She didn't actually end up leaving Cafe Services. She's back as our lead for Cafe Services. And she's working. We continue to have free breakfast and lunch for any community member, and I really want families to hear that the federal government allows us to be serving any child who is hungry breakfast and lunch. And that's a huge undertaking, so thank you to Dan Rosner, who helps make that happen, and to Tracy Sawyer. Under facilities, I wanted to also let you know that you had authorized the purchase of new cafeteria equipment for cooking and storing food, and that was installed last week. So we're moving ahead with some of those facilities initiatives. In recent events, I can't believe that this was already a month ago, but the 8th graders went on their overnight trip to Franconia and Notch, which last year's class did not get to do. That was a huge success. I'm going to just pause for a moment because it's really, we go about our day here at Plymouth or our year and we think, oh, well, the kids are going on their overnight, they're going on their overnight. And we don't even necessarily pause for a moment and recognize how big it is for some of these kids to hike these 4,000 footers. It really is a life-changing event. There are 2 individuals who went on that hike who came back and are different kids. They feel better about themselves, they walk taller, they know how to support each other. And I just, you know, we gloss over that stuff here, like, of course, they're going on their hike, but it's really a remarkable event. 7th graders went to Geneva Point, and this year we included some students who don't always want to participate, and some of those individuals also took some huge risks and did some trust falls, and the students in this building made room for kids of all variety, and it's just remarkable. So, as I mentioned before, we hosted Chris Van Dusen as an author, and that was fantastic. He got all those kids pumped up and excited to read. We hosted Rachel's Challenge, K-8, and that was remarkable. And I want to just, I did meet with the 8th grade parents virtually regarding the 8th grade trip and graduation and all of the end of the year fundraising and organizing. Want to encourage the 8th grade parents to take the survey. Please let us know what your thoughts are so that we can move forward with our process. And coming up soon, we have teacher in-service next Tuesday. There's no school on Monday or Tuesday next week. Our teachers will be working with the consultant that we started working with this summer, Polly Bath. She'll be here all day, but students will be at home. And progress reports come out next week. And on November 2nd, we have parent-teacher conferences, which we will be holding both virtually and in person. So please look for that sign up in the coming probably week and a half or 2 weeks for that. And that is my report.
Thank you.
Yes, my report is much smaller, but so I just wanted to let you know all of our fall teams have been really active, moving through the season, what seems to be very quickly. Most teams are midway point right now with anywhere between 4 to 6 events left. Just today we had field hockey and volleyball hosting Kingswood and Campton. Soccer was on the road over to Kingswood, and this week we'll also have football traveling to Winnisquam on Wednesday. And on Thursday, if you're around, our cross-country team will be hosting their very first race here at Plymouth Elementary, so they're pretty excited about that, and we're looking for great weather. And if you can believe it or not, winter sports are about a month away. So we'll be holding our winter sports signups at some point in the next couple of weeks, and we'll post all that information on the website as well. In terms of safety, so far PES has held 3 fire drills. We completed one of our bus evacuation drills. We'll be holding another one in the spring. We do have a secure classroom drill coming up soon, and our teachers have been reviewing all the safety protocols with the students. We'll also have our faculty and staff test out the new Informacast emergency app this month as well. And our safety committee will be meeting again this Wednesday.
Thank you. Discussion items. So,
I had some things first before you.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say, go ahead.
So well, things change every month, so
Yeah.
I might as well update you on what the changes are if I can get that out in a coherent way. A lot's happened over the past month, just kind of a report out on the schools. We did deal with a cluster that had a number of students at Wentworth Elementary School. Both exposures in and out of school from that piece. So that just closed out. We're down to 1 person having testing positive right now. We dealt with a cluster at the high school. And a cluster is 3 related cases determined to happen in school. So typically a sports team or an activity during school. It's not identified with household contact. So if there's 3 siblings that are related, it wouldn't be contributed to a cluster. So just to report a little bit on the Wentworth, not that it's just a clarifying piece. There are several families with multiple children, so we would get 4 or 5 cases in from one family at a time. So those numbers ticked up very quickly. We worked with Department of Health daily on what to do that's a little more strict for mitigation strategies. The recommendations don't really change from what's already in the toolkit that we follow. And then it's really, I'm sure you've seen on the news and from the governor about the remote learning piece, that it's not allowable anymore, but then there's a loophole that if you really wanted to do it, you can. But honestly, the message from the commissioner and the Department of Ed is that we do not go shift to remote learning. So we have stayed open, even though we had very few kids in the building at Wentworth, to offer 5 days a week of in person. The only student, the other piece, just to remind you of, there's a big difference, you know, from last year. You know, masking is up to school boards. Close contacts, there's a very different definition of close contacts. Last year, any close contacts within 6 feet for 15 minutes over 24 hours were told to stay home in quarantine. I know many of you had children that were out for 30, 40, 50 days because they happened to sit next to someone during lunch on the bus or interacted with them during sports. It's very different this year. The only close contacts that are required to quarantine are household contacts that are unvaccinated. So that really changes the number of kids. So even though there's students that are close contacts, you know, we do have parameters around suggesting they wear a mask and monitor for symptoms and consider a test after 3 to 5 days if they've been considered a close contact. So that's a huge difference in a mitigation strategy. Department of Health quarantines, not the district. The last piece is the remote learning piece. You know, we shifted in and out of remote learning quite a bit last year. We're remaining open. So given those 3 factors around masking, close contacts, and the remote learning, I think you're going to see, you know, depending on the district or wherever, a significant uptick in cases. We have seen a significant uptick, I'll be honest. Luckily, all the cases have been very mild. But I just think it's a fact of what's going to happen this year. Many of the districts have, it's SAU 48 is as local control as you can get. Having schools 2 miles away from each other, have very different policies on all kinds of things, including masking. So at this point, we have 2 districts that require masking, both Holderness and Wentworth, with different parameters. In Thornton, sorry, 3.
Waterville?
One is indoors all the time, that's Waterville. Thornton is, it's within 3 feet, but they follow the 6 feet recommendation around requiring, they review it every month, and it's indoors. The other one is Holderness, is within 6 feet with several exceptions indoors. The rest of the schools remain recommended only, or as ultimately optional. Rumney and Wentworth just passed a motion in the past couple of weeks that if there is identified cluster or outbreak, so an outbreak is 2 clusters, so it can be, you know, 2 sets of 3 that are considered an outbreak that are related to each other. So that they have given me the authority to implement required masking when there is a cluster or an outbreak. And I did this, we did that when Wentworth had their cluster, we went to a requirement. And then Department of Health told me when the end of the cluster was, and they're back to recommended or optional. So that is where that's where kind of the whole district is. I don't think I missed anything as far as that goes. I gave you an updated toolkit. We went over this months ago when we did our opening plan. The changes are in orange, September 17th. They updated a few pieces. I won't go over it line by line, but one, you know, something they clearly identified. There was lots of confusion around 3 feet, 6 feet, and so they clarified that for us within 6 feet, which is why we recommended within 6 feet at the last update that we did. They also clarified what a cluster or an outbreak it was. Last year it was 3 clusters were considered an outbreak. This year they changed the definition to 2. I think, I just wanted to, the wording on the masking is on page 5. Just to look at, they just pointed out recommended face masks for everyone where the level of New Hampshire community transmission reaches substantial in the region where the school or district child care program is operating, and then responding to cases or clusters, which I just talked about. So in-school transmission as well. And then the recommendation to not use physical barriers, we actually, like the plexiglass is no longer recommended. We didn't use much of that to begin with anyways. We have shifted to really, I'll just speak to Plymouth Elementary alone. Just, in regards to assemblies, or you're having authors come, it really staggering what we can do and limiting, making sure there's distancing in the gym when there's stuff going on in there as well. So just being mindful of that. The distancing in classrooms, there's a lot of self-reporting, I think, going home from students. That's a little bit all over the place, and I think Tanya has it is flexible grouping sometimes. Kids are working in groups. So I would say that they're within 3 to 6 feet, but it's still, recommended or optional as far as masking, so they can choose if they're gonna put that on or not. Am I missing anything as far, I wanted to report on the number of people masking. I asked Tanya to just get a read on if you're recommending how many folks are actually wearing masks. I think it's true, the older the students are, the less they're wearing them. All of the teachers are wearing them, and for the most part, and the younger the students, I think the higher percentage of the kids that are wearing them.
I'm willing to estimate, but I'd like to say that it's an estimate.
Okay, so what's your estimate?
My estimate is that in the primary wing, we are above 85% with mask wearing. And I'm probably underestimating that if I was going to. In the intermediate wing, I would say I think it started higher than it is now. So I think it was closer to 50, and I think it's bet down to about 40 or around there. Kelly, speak up if you think I'm totally off representing. And in the middle school, it's quite low. So I would say it's 10%-ish. Maybe a little higher for middle school. But.
Yeah. So it's just a general awareness of there's been very few cases here at the elementary school, because I just think that's luck of the draw, really. I mean, if you look at what we've seen as far as parents have really done a good job screening kids before they come to school, but the nurse's office has been very busy in sending kids home and managing symptoms as well. So that, just to clarify, if kids go home with symptoms, they do have to get a test to return, or they have to stay home for 10 days. So that's something that was put back into place where we were going to originally go back to our just our sick policy that we had at school. We did move back to that. We're still doing press releases in the videos, although sometimes I really feel like I'm repeating myself, but I think it's important for folks to know, to be transparent about the cases that we do have going on, even if it's significant. So we're going to continue that. Many districts are not doing that anymore across the state. They're not reporting cases. They're just saying to go to the dashboard at the state, at DHHS, which takes about a month to catch up to us. So so we do still have live data on our website. That's all I have for COVID. But at this time, you have a recommendation right now for all students and staff to wear a mask when indoors within 6 feet. So that's where you stand now. If you were to change that or lighten it or become more strict, now would be the time to discuss that.
I'd like to. Yes.
Can I make a motion that we require masks indoors less than 6 feet? And I'm open for discussion.
Okay.
I will second. And then we can discuss. So I do think that I think that everybody on the board is clearly in support of maintaining the health of our children and families. I don't think that's ever been in question from my perspective, but given the uptick in rates of infection, I would support moving forward with this and just revisiting it monthly as needed.
One of the reasons I'm saying it is that I agree with the whole recommendation, but I do believe, having worked in the schools, the data that you're presenting is true, that kids, by the time they get to middle school, even though the parents tell them to wear it and they walk to school with it and then they take it off. So I just think the consistency is something that will make it much easier in the long run than, oh, are we supposed to today? Is there a cluster today? Is there this? Or, I just think there's too much variation within a day and from day to day. But I would agree that the board should look at it at least well, I guess it would be monthly.
And if I can go back and say, I think the thing we should be looking at is when Grafton County drops below substantial transmission rates, I think we should consider that a trigger to reconsider at that point.
I would ask that you consider multiple data points if you went to that piece, because it is a pretty large county.
Yes.
And they have separated out the county. We're still at substantial. We're not on the other side of the county. It's a little bit better than us.
Right.
But I think it's a pretty large county. I just ask that we look at multiple points of data, including our local cases, as well as vaccination rates if they go up. Right. I mean, obviously they're pretty low right now. Mm-hmm. And in-school transmission, I think, is an important data point.
Yes. I guess I wasn't suggesting that be the only criteria.
Okay. I always like to be clear because if we're implementing, I just want to make sure.
No, I think the board should evaluate it. Continue at the next few meetings.
Is there anything to say?
Still thinking. I think we do need to look at a lot of different data points, right? We're not going to have 0 cases of COVID no matter what we do, right? We're going to have some. Fortunately, all of the evidence shows that the vast majority of children have relatively minor symptoms. As of last week, there were not a single case of a COVID pediatric hospitalization across the state of New Hampshire. And so I think we need to consider all of that data as we make this decision. I'm also sensitive to not putting teachers in a spot where they have to be police, if you will. The federal government says on the bus you have to wear a mask, but oh, by the way, you can ride a mask if you're not wearing a bus. So I think we need to be sensitive to that piece of it.
If you're not wearing a bus?
I mean, sorry. You have to wear a mask to ride on the bus, but they cannot turn you away if you're not wearing a mask.
Right.
Correct?
Okay. Yep.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think there's pluses and minuses to this discussion.
I think we also need to keep in mind, too, that historically school rates have reflected community rates, not the other way around. So it's being brought into the schools rather than brought out of the school into the community is what most of the transmission data that I've read. I also, to kind of echo Mike's point, I worry about adding more onto the teacher's plate to be, for lack of a better term, mask police, about put your mask on, put your mask up, which I know was an issue last year. So, but also sensitive to the need to do what we can to decrease the spread.
Can I ask if does that become a major issue? Or is it easier if it's just all or nothing?
Can you
Like,
say that one more time?
the question, what Frank had said about the teachers being the mask police, so to speak, is that become a real controversy, or is it
Well, I think your
Okay,
teachers-
everybody's wearing them, that's just how it is, and,
Your teachers will do whatever the board policy is.
Yeah.
And they're incredibly flexible and willing to do whatever is in place.
okay.
Yes, they've done an amazing job so far.
They certainly have.
Yeah.
So you want to vote on your motion, Fran?
I don't know, do you want to say anything?
I am sort of torn. I think I understand people's reactions and I support that and the data and the numbers and all the things. So I support the decision to review it on a monthly basis. And I would also like to think about if there's a cluster, giving, Kyla the permission to change the decision to it being changed. Versus if we left it the same and recommended and continued it as, it was recommended, but if there was an outbreak, then give Kyle the opportunity to say, okay, there's X amount of cases now in Plymouth Elementary School, we're going to now mandate masks. Yeah, I think I would be more comfortable doing that based on what's happening in the school as of right now.
So that's two different things, right?
Right.
So what,
Correct.
we have to make a decision to vote on mandated or required, whatever is a good term, not sure.
So if you're gonna just change recommend to require, it's the same. It's the
Within
same
6
thing.
feet.
It's a mandate.
So we can vote on that, and then if it passes, it passes. If it doesn't, then we would do a different,
You can
then,
modify a motion, you can come up with a compromise, whatever you'd like to do as a board.
you guys want to vote and then go from there, or how do you want to proceed?
Motion.
Pardon?
We could modify the motion as well. That's on the floor.
Okay,
I would propose that we modify the motion to echo what Amy said, that in the case of a cluster or an outbreak, we give administration the ability and the flexibility to be able to issue a mask mandate at that time.
so I would like personally to make a vote first, and if that is not accepted, then to, what would be the word?
You can make a new
To
motion.
Make a new motion.
Sure.
But I don't know, can I do
So
that?
Frank made a motion, nobody seconded it at this point.
Oh,
so,
okay,
Yep, that's fine.
Yes, your original motion is still on the floor.
okay.
It is. Just for point of order.
And we can always revisit it. I mean, part of the motion is to revisit it on a monthly basis.
Mhm.
So next month, we may decide, okay, there's been no cases at all.
Yeah.
So let's review next month, and then we can make an additional motion, the following month if nothing has happened. Is there?
I worry about the potential, so if we go forward with the original motion, which is to just require masks within 6 feet of all students, the hard part becomes stepping away and saying, do we have a data point that justifies that? Because 3 months into the future, we may say, hey, we've had very few cases, but we might also say, hey, the first 2 months of school, we didn't have a mask mandate, and we did have very few cases there too. So I'd say, an argument that supports Frank's amendment would be that we would be entrusting the superintendent with the ability to impose that only if there were a cluster or an outbreak, which is more responsive, I think, and I think would probably create a suitable learning environment for students. There are going to be students who are reluctant to do this, and that is going to create conflict. And we have not seen evidence of transmission between students in the school to date, all of last year, all of this year. So, I'm okay with it either way.
But last year we wore masks for
We did.
what % of the year?
The whole year.
The whole year.
The whole year.
100%. Except for 2 days at the end of the year, but.
Right.
Certainly, you could argue it's October.
Mhm.
We're up to 3 cases now, 2 students and 1 staff member, right? That's a pretty low number with what exactly we have been doing. We're not thinking about the layered approach, right? Masks are one piece of the equation, they're not all of it. There's a whole host of other things that we're doing to mitigate. There's lots of different opinions on science around masks, and I'm not going to get into what other people think or don't think, but that's just one piece of the equation.
Yeah.
Evidence suggests what we're doing right now works pretty well.
Okay, so we can vote on Fran's motion. And then,
Is there any other discussion or?
Maybe.
Okay.
Dan just wanted.
Madam Chair, I just want to offer a piece of procedural guidance or advice, especially because there's a larger audience. You have a motion that was seconded, you had an amendment that was moved. The proper procedure by Robert's Rule of Orders would be to vote on the amendment. And if it passes, if the amendment gets seconded, which it hasn't yet, to my ears, then you would vote on the amendment, and then you would vote on the amended motion.
So nobody seconded the amendment at this point,
Correct.
so I think we're okay to vote on.
Yeah, so if the amendment dies for lack of a second, then you would vote on the original motion.
Yes,
thank you.
I agree.
But then Frank, depending on what happens, Frank could bring that up as a new motion, correct?
Absolutely.
I'm going to make this easier. I'm going to second Frank's motion.
No.
Or second Frank's amendment. So now we have to vote on Frank's amendment.
Can you repeat the amendment real quick? I couldn't hear.
Basically to allow administration the flexibility to enhance masking requirements in the case of a cluster or an outbreak.
So to move to a mandate if
Yes.
there's a cluster or an outbreak?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so let's,
So for clarification.
Yes, because I'm confused
Yeah.
now too.
So now we have,
we have to vote on.
We have to vote on
the-
Frank's first.
The amendment first.
Right.
And then if it passes, we can either approve it as a modification to yours, or if it fails, we vote on your original motion.
okay.
Wow, I'm getting a headache.
Yeah.
Me too.
This is very confusing. Okay, so we're gonna vote on the amendment to allow administration to require masks if there's an outbreak.
Cluster.
Or cluster.
Yes.
Or a cluster.
But I
Just
still don't
clarify.
understand, because if we vote on that, let's say, then that gets agreed, and so mine is gone.
It's a modification to yours.
Your motion is now amended to Frank's wording,
Right.
and that's the motion that's voted on.
But if, let's say, okay. All right.
If we all vote no on Frank's
Then we vote on
amendment, then we
yours.
go back
Okay.
to your original language.
Okay,
Does that make sense, right?
yep.
Okay. All right,
Do you want to do a roll call?
yes. So, Frank,
Aye.
Phil.
Aye.
Frank,
No,
Mike.
Aye.
No, aye.
So the amendment
Okay.
passes.
The
Now we have
amendment
to vote.
passes.
Now you want to vote on the motion.
Now we have to vote on the amended motion.
On the motion,
On
not
the
on the amended motion.
Well, we
On
voted
the
the
motion.
amendment. Now we have to
Yes,
approve
you're essentially
Fran's.
now implementing what Frank recommended, what Frank put forward. Before you were just changing the wording of Fran's motion.
Okay,
Now you're voting to implement.
Wow.
okay. Thank you.
Now we're voting to do what?
What?
Say that again, Dan, please.
Sure, so the first one you just took was to amend the motion, not
Okay.
to adopt,
I
We have
see.
to approve the motion.
Yeah.
right? So now you'll be voting on whether or not to
To
implement
implement.
the reworded motion.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. All right, we'll do a roll call again. Frank,
Yes.
Yes.
Fran?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
And it's a yes for me.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so just for a clarification, you would like me to impose a requirement if there's a cluster identified or an outbreak. I will be clear, I'm not gonna do targeted masking like for a classroom, it's gonna be whole school.
Yes.
It's
Correct.
It's our school,
That's our
it's
understanding.
easier to implement, so. if
Correct.
Yes.
Some superintendents are just masking a fifth grade classroom, it's gonna, if there's a cluster identified, I'm gonna go into 2 weeks of masking at least until the Department of Health tells us it's closed.
Yes.
Okay.
Are you good with
Yes.
that?
Yep.
Yep.
All right.
Are you good with that, Kyla?
What? Just keeping it all together.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank
I
you.
did, I do apologize in my video, I said you had no school this Friday, but you know what? You actually do have school Friday. So I
I knew
apologize
you
for
were
that.
wrong as soon as you said it, I knew it wasn't correct.
Hard to keep it straight sometimes. Okay.
So do you want to read the SASS information?
So I know it came up last month with SASS, so SAS is not only your academic testing, but also the testing offered through the state for COVID. So I just gave you an FAQ sheet if you want to look for informational purposes. You just wanted me to bring it back for information. So I attached what came from us from the state. Any questions about implementation, any specifics around that, so it's under review if you want to look at that piece as well.
That was in this, it's in
It
the
was in
tool.
your agenda.
Okay. All right. I remember looking at it, but I don't remember where it was.
Thank you. And then reporting of abuse or neglect policy, the second reading.
So second reading, so at this point, like last month, there's 2 different required policies coming towards you. Child abuse and neglect is the reporting piece, so the right to know. We do provide the training for that. And there's some new stipulations required by law. So like this, the New Hampshire School Boards puts out a template, so this template reflects the law exactly. So it's nothing that exceeds what's going on, but it's just clarifying the mandatory reporting requirements that we have around child abuse and neglect.
Okay. Someone want to make a motion to approve that policy?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor of that?
Aye.
Aye.
Student discipline policy.
So again, this is required by law, and we've talked about having additional policies will come up as well. And then it's just certain parameters around what we can implement. It basically puts into place some interventions that need to take place instead of going right to suspension. It's more for high school, but it really talks about prevention more than reaction. So that's the message around that piece as well. It goes into some language around weapons and modification to the definition around that piece, as well as detentions, suspensions, and the parameters around that. Your handbooks, this may be in conflict with some of your handbooks, so if it does change it, then Tanya and Kelly will update it to reflect the current policy. And it is required, it's not something that's optional.
I will move that we approve the student discipline policy as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Financial report.
So Dan is here, not only to review procedures, but
I
to review your fiscal year ending June 30th, so going over all of the reports. Last month we signed the MS-25, so it's just a summary of what the final standings is. Dan?
Sure, thank you. You have a summary document in front of you. I don't want to take too much of your time this evening, too many of the details that go into that. Really, the year ended in sound financial shape. Points of note are that the unreserved fund balance of $293,000, that's the amount that will become a revenue in the current year to reduce the local taxation. And that is after you voted to retain $271,000 as the voters authorized you to do for future use. and also put $50,000 into your capital reserve fund. One of the documents, one of the pages in that report talks about the capital reserve fund, and you'll see a balance of $56,722 at year end. That is before the additional $50,000 will go in, because that can't happen until after the year is closed out. So that's a snapshot of time of June 30th. So essentially, as we move into this year, you have a little over $106,000 in your capital reserve fund for building maintenance. The two single greatest contributions to the year ending in such good shape were revenues being higher. Total general fund revenues were $526,000 before we get to the local assessment. The assessment was actually knocked back and lowered by $174,000 based on the prior year's fund balance. And then you had a number of expenditure accounts that were managed very well by Tanya and her team. And in addition, some expenses were able to be shifted into some of the COVID funding that we received from the federal government. So a combination of events that led to the year ending in strong financial shape. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Yes, any questions for Dan?
I don't have any questions, but I do appreciate the responsible nature that everybody worked to maintain our finances in good shape this year. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
And any other business?
No.
Okay. All right, recognition and rewards. Claims and payroll, everybody sign
But,
this.
yeah, and I don't have any written correspondence that was submitted.
And recognition and awards, nothing to add.
Tanya, do you have any?
None that I included them all in my shows.
Okay.
All right, perfect, thank you. Quick motion to go into non-public,
So moved.
all in favor?
Aye.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
There was a second in there. That was me.
Yeah.
I was thinking